She's the director of the Carilion Clinic Huntington's Disease Program in Roanoke, Virginia. She's also assistant professor in the Department of Basic Science Education at Virginia Tech, Carilion School of Medicine. She is the director of special programs for HD Reach, located in Raleigh, North Carolina, and the president and owner of HTA Consulting PLLC, where she provides online teletherapy and conducts clinical research. Dr. Hennig-Trestman also serves as the research co-chair on the board of directors for the Huntington's Disease Youth Organization, yay, and has over 30 years of expertise providing clinical service and supervision with patients and family members suffering from neurodegenerative, physical, and psychiatric illness. And her book, Talking to Kids About HD, a book for people who know children with HD in their family, has been translated into 5 languages. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here. So in terms of English, how is everyone pretty proficient? You think? Okay. So again, if you are not, and if this is a little fast, because I realized I have a half an hour, which is a very short period of time, I'm going to go a little bit fast. But know that this is going to be online, and it will be able to be translated online. So if your first language is not English, and you feel like you're missing things, please know that you can go online and it will be translated. I'm going to go through everything as quickly as I can without being too fast, and ask you to hold any questions. I will be here for the rest of the day and a little bit tomorrow morning, so if there are questions and you want to come up to me, feel free to do that either later today or tomorrow, that will help. Okay, so we're going to talk about a whole bunch of things. Understanding the reasons for talking to kids about HD, knowing the who, when, how, and what about talking to kids, learning about kids' emotions, and learning approaches of sharing information. A lot of what I have in my book is a lot of examples, which I think is really helpful, and they're all also ages and stage appropriate information. But again, I've got 30 minutes, so I'm trying to get the biggest bang for the buck and give you a little bit, a little tapas, a little smorgasbord of this topic. So again, if you have other concerns or questions, I will be around. All right, so let's get right into it in terms of reasons for talking to kids about HD. First of all, a child does have the right to know about anything that affects the family. By not talking about HD, children learn not to trust. Children also know that there is something wrong, even if you try to hide it. By not saying anything, sometimes they have fears that are worse than the real situation. For instance, I have worked with children and families who have felt that no one is speaking to them, and so that they must have done something to cause a person to become sick in the family. And in turn, they have guilt and they have anxiety. Not talking about Huntington's disease also gives a message that this is a subject too terrible to discuss. More reasons are children find the truth out from someone else, especially with social media, especially we're talking about people putting information on their Instagram, on their Facebook. I had one child I worked with the family for a long time, and the mother was just about ready to talk to her son. And he came home from a biology class in the United States, and he said, you know, the teacher put on all of these what we call genetic illnesses, and one of them was Huntington's disease, and she wrote all of the symptoms of Huntington's disease. And he said, is that what Dad has? So that's how this child found out about Huntington's disease. I worked with her a long time, and she was able to finally say, yes, I was going to talk to you about this. I'm sorry this is the way this is coming up, but she was able to work with that child. Children who are informed can also be a comfort for you. Now, it's not that children are your psychologists or social workers or psychiatrists, but you will not feel that you have to spend more energy into remembering what you told them about a lie if you are honest. Children also have an amazing ability and capacity to deal with real situations. They are resilient. And fears we have to know are learned. That's based on science. When you are with a baby and you put a fake snake in front of a baby isn't saying, oh my gosh, it's a snake. It's just a thing there. But when a baby sees us as adults going, oh my gosh, a snake or a spider or something scary, then they learn to model that. So it's really important to remember fears are learned. And then if the person with HD shows behaviors which now have an explanation, children will learn that this is normal for our family and continue to show affection and respect for that person. So who should tell the kids? If you can, and when I'm going to use the term parent, caregiver, aunt, uncle, grandparent, it's all going to be, basically looped into one term, whether I say parent or caregiver. But I understand that families are all kinds of, they come in different shapes and sizes and flavors. So, when I say parent, you make the interpretation. So if you can, you should tell the kids about Huntington's disease, and I'll give you more information. If you feel you can't, if you're the person who is affected by Huntington's disease, if you are the well parent who just does not have that kind of relationship, if there's a close family member who has the correct facts, not the aunt who's going to sugarcoat everything and say everything is going to be okay, but the aunt or the uncle or somebody who's going to be able to be informed and to be able to give the child facts or information about HD, then they can. Also, professional staff. And again, I'm talking to a global audience here, and I understand that not everyone has this ability to have somebody like My Clinic or HDYO available. But if you do have professional staff, that is really helpful, and have them work with the family. However, I always tell people that before you do that, before you have a professional, at least give the children basic information. For us, walking into a clinic or walking into a hospital might not feel scary, but for a child who doesn't know what they're going in to do, that could be really scary. And it's really hard to put yourself in the perspective of a child's eyes, but I ask you to do that, to say, even if you give some basic information, which again, I will give you. When should you tell the kids? At all ages. So sometimes the younger the child is, the more basic the information can be. So you're not giving a dissertation to your child. You're not giving all this information. It could be very, very basic. And obviously, adolescence might be a time for more specific questions that you have. But please know it's never too early, but it's also never too late. I have so many people who come up to me after I give this lecture who say, I did it wrong, I waited, I goofed up. No, you didn't. You did the best you could with the information that you had at that time. Now you have a jumping off point where you can say, I just went to a conference and I learned information, and I learned how important it is for you to be heard. I just heard Dr. Nick talk about that, or somebody talking about that feeling of being invisible. So there's never too early and there's never too late. All right, how should you tell my kids? First, and I mentioned this before, look at your own feelings about HD. What is your experience when you grew up? Because that is going to greatly impact how you do this. And if you are an adult who hasn't been told about HD until you were older, if you had a poor experience, I want you to at least think about trying to talk to somebody, talk it through with somebody, because your affect, the way that you're going to be talking about HD to your children, is going to come through from your past experience. So if you can get a little bit of counseling to process your journey, I think that could be really helpful. And find a language that's comfortable to you. So you might not use all of these big words. You might use small words. You might use language that you understand. But please label it the correct thing. Kind of like when you say to a child when they fall and they get a boo-boo, you're like, oh, you have a boo-boo. And so I had a family who would say, oh, Daddy has a boo-boo in his head, in his brain. So when that child fell in the playground and the nurse said, oh, you have a boo-boo, this child was freaking out. I scraped my knee, so I have the same thing that Daddy has. So again, this is about perspective and putting yourself in the eyes of the child and saying, how do I do this? Obviously, different ages need to be talked to with different words, with different language. However, I have so many different people in families who say, well, I have 4 children, so I told the oldest one, and I told him or her or them not to say anything to the other children. And what I say is, I know you're trying to protect the children, or they say to me, I have one child who has mental issues or emotional problems, or I really worry about that child because he or she or they is a worrier. And I say, I understand why you're doing that, but I want you to also think about the burden that you just put on the one child or the 2 children that you already told. You've told that children not to tell. 1 or 2 things might happen. They won't tell, and they're carrying around that burden, or they will tell, and now there's more secrets because those other children are being told not to tell the parents. So I think it's really important that you give everyone basic information. And role play, practice what you're going to be saying and anticipate the tough questions. Are you going to die from this? Am I going to die from this? When is Daddy going to die? What's going to happen? You have to, again, think all of these things through. And find a comfortable or familiar place to talk to your children. I have one family who did most of their talking in the car. It was really easy. Mom and dad were, sitting in the front seat and looking forward. The kids were in the back, and when they were talking about things like sex, all kinds of things that might be uncomfortable for a family to talk about, they didn't have to look at each other. This was for this family. They were openly talking about difficult topics, but going for a ride or doing something together was really comforting to them, and that this was their way of doing this. So whether it's doing dishes or playing a game or sitting on the couch or just saying, now's the time that we're going to be talking about Huntington's disease, it was familiar to them. What and how much? We're going to talk about telling children information they can understand. We're going to talk about listening to them, telling them how you feel, and being aware of what I call the don'ts and some ways to talk to kids. So telling information, gradually share bits of information. I want you to think about when you start to feed a baby solid food. We're not giving them a steak, right? And I'm being facetious on purpose. You take a teeny spoon, you put a little mush on it, you give it to the baby, and you wait to see how they react. That's how I want you to think about this conversation. It can be small, it can be teeny tiny, little bits of basic information, and we want to see how that child is digesting the information. And you know your kids well. So if they're really having a hard time with this, that's the time to stop. If they could take that little bit of information in, then you can give them a little bit more information, and wait to see if they have questions. Always, always, always leave them with a feeling of hope. I don't just do this for children. I do this for every single person that I do teletherapy. I do this with every single person that comes into my clinic, that when they walk out the door, I can't change these big things. I can't make HD go away. But I can say to them that I have hope, and especially taking some of these slides that we saw with all of those pharmaceutical companies. I love that slide. I took a picture of it, and I'm going to bring that to every single person that I work with in my clinic, because that, to me, is hope. It's real. It's science. So when I leave a conversation with an adult or a child, I'm always telling them that there's always something that can be done, and that there's always going to be hope. We're never going to be taking that away. And always tell the child that they'll be loved and cared for. There's many children, and again, I don't have the time to break down all the ages and stages, but many times when a child is asking questions or wants to know information, they're afraid about being left alone. They're afraid about what's going to happen to me in the future, even though it might be about mom or dad who has Huntington's disease. Please let them know that no matter what, we have a plan. We want to make sure that you know that you're going to be taken care of and that you're safe. And figure out that plan, even if you don't have one right now. Think about what the plan is going to be in the future. In terms of listening to them, answer questions simply. When a child is asking, how do you know? How do you know you have this? It's not about CAG repeats. It's not about axons and alleles and all this stuff. I went to the doctors, and I had this blood test, and it showed that I have this thing called Huntington's disease. It's real simple information. I also ask adults and children, tell me what you think HD is. And I formulate it this way. When I'm doing genetic counseling for genetic testing for people, one of the last questions I ask, I say, if I was an alien that came down from outer space and I never heard about Huntington's disease, how would you describe that to me? And I get all kinds of stuff. And I'm not just talking about from children, from adults giving me all kinds of information. It's my opportunity to correct the things that are not correct. I can confirm things, I can give them, I can validate, but it's giving me the understanding of, it's telling me what they understand and giving me their perspective so that I can give that information back. Then ask them if they're worried about you. Are you worried about Dad? Are you worried about me? No, I'm not worried about you. Yeah, of course they're worried about you. And you can validate again by saying, you might not be worried right now, but when I heard about this, I really did worry. I worried about Dad. I worried about Grandma. Just know it's okay to worry, and we can't stop you from worrying, but if we all think about worrying together, then we're not going to be alone. So if you're ever worried, I want you to come to me. If you don't feel comfortable coming to me, I want you to go to somebody else. Here's the name of, Auntie. Here's the name of Grandpa. Here's the name of somebody else. Here's the name of a clinician. Because worrying is part of this, and we want to make it normal. We don't want to say, don't worry. If someone says to you, don't worry, what's the first thing you do? You worry, right? So we want to normalize that. We also want to look for nonverbal cues to see if a child has had enough. You all know that. It's that glaze over, they're thinking about something else, they might be on their phone, they're not paying attention, they've shut off. There's that invisible switch that the child just shuts off, and we all know when that happens. So you don't have to keep talking. You can give a little bit of information, but tell them that you're going to come back. So that you've left the door open. This is not one and done. This is not throwing a pamphlet from HDYO on the child's bed and saying, you know, see ya, this is this. This is about, we've had enough right now, I gave you information, but I'm going to come back to all of this, and we're going to talk about this again. Being aware of the don'ts. Please don't lie. Please don't tell your child you're not going to get Huntington's disease if you don't know. There's some people, and I'm unfortunately been doing this long enough that I'm on my third generation of people with Huntington's disease. There are some families that say, you're not going to get this. You know, we did PGD. We were able to make sure that this child is growing up and not going to be at risk for this disease. But just don't lie. It's really hard to come back from that. Don't overburden your children with a lot of medical details. And I think you probably heard me do this when we were, talking at the very first about the tools in your toolbox. It's kind of ingrained in me. So this is just something, if you ask me a question, I'll answer it, and then I'll say, did that answer your question? Ask them, did I answer your question? Did I make the mark? Because you might ask me a question, I might think I understand what the question is and give you the answer, and you're going, that's not what I meant at all. So just asking, did that answer your question, can be really helpful. Do not trouble your children with financial concerns unless it impacts them. The families that I work with say, mom's not going to be able to work anymore, she's going on disability, or we're losing an income. They're not going to be able to do the same things that, the one vacation or a special thing, we're not going to be able to do that anymore. Okay, then you need to let your child know what to expect. But when you are overburdening them with adult things, that really does make them worry, and it's not necessary. Don't make promises you can't keep. The promise that I'm thinking of, I promise not to put mom or dad in a nursing home. I promise not to do all of these things, because you just set yourself up, and it could be a lot of resentment later on. What you can say is, I don't know what the future is going to hold. I don't know means one of two things. I don't know now, but maybe I'll know later. Or I don't know means, I don't know, and we don't know if we're going to know in the future. But I'm going to be honest with you, when I do find out, I'll let you know. But don't be afraid of I don't know. And don't push your kids to talk. Inevitably, at the end of these conversations, people say, I've got this kid, they're not willing to talk. Okay, all right. I mean, it's a struggle, especially if it's adolescence. You can certainly say, I'm going to give you information. You don't have to ask me any questions if you don't want. But I gave you a lot of information today. This is the tip that I'm going to give you. And I know your friends could be a support to you. This is what you can say. But not a lot of people know about HD. So if you have questions, I want to make sure you get the right answers. And there's organizations like HDYO that can help you to answer some of these questions. So always open the door. Always just check in. But a lot of times I will have people say, I'm dragging my 13-year-old in the office and sitting him in the chair. That kid does not want to be in my office. I'll do everything I can. I'll start talking to them. We'll start coloring. We could do things. But if that child's not going to want to talk, then they're going to hate me too. But if you say, I know this is tough, and I can connect you as a parent to HDYO and see if you are willing to go to a conference or you're willing to go someplace with that child, so that child knows that this is not as scary as you think it can be. All right, ways to say things. Make it real, real simple. Mommy, daddy, whoever it is that you call it, has an illness. All right, just the way you say they have a cold. They have, and I'm not, again, not berating this, but I want you to take it down to the basic information. They have a disease, an illness, whatever you want to call it. It's called Huntington's disease. Label it. So we're not talking about boo-boos. We're not talking about something else. HD. It's an illness that makes mom, dad do some things that aren't always normal, and you can take it one step ahead if you need. Draw a family tree. Without really discussing at-risk status, if you don't want to do that the very first thing, then you'll be able to teach that child to understand that this is a disease in the family. And again, people ask me, when is the right time? I don't want to let them to know when they're at risk. The minute you give them information, and if they're above 3, they're going to go on the internet anyway, okay? And they're going to get this information. So I'd rather it come from you than all those crazy sites that are out there. Coping with the unknowns and uncertainties. There are many unknowns and uncertainties in dealing with Huntington's disease. There are some questions you're not going to be able to answer. I think it's really important for you to understand that you need to accept this, and then the children will be able to accept this as well. When you say, I don't know the answer to that, and you're like, it's hard not to know, but we're going to not know together. But find out as much as you can to make the unknown familiar. In terms of dealing with changes, again, let a child know gradually that there might be changes in what the person with HD is able to do. When a person is tested, and again, I'm going to give you that public service announcement that I did yesterday. Tested and diagnosed are usually two different things. If you are asymptomatic, no symptoms, and you're testing because you're at risk, and you're positive or in the gray area, that does not mean you have Huntington's disease. Symptoms mean you have Huntington's disease. So if you have yourself somebody who's tested, who's at risk and is positive, and then all of a sudden you say, well, daddy has Huntington's disease, daddy might stop, driving or going to work, and that's not going to happen for years and years. Of course, you're not going to mention that to a child right away. But if you say, in another month, dad's having trouble at work, and in another month he's going to be at home, but we're going to try to make things as normal as possible. He's going to get up with us, or he's going to help to get the lunches ready, or he's going to need to be away because it's too overwhelming for him in the morning. Giving the child information gradually can really help to set the stage. Try to keep your household routines as normal as possible without denying the illness. If you are a person with Huntington's disease, meaning that you are symptomatic, and your family is tiptoeing around, and you are having difficulty driving, and you're putting your children in a car or van or whatever, and you're the one driving because you don't want to talk to your loved one who has Huntington's disease about how dangerous it is for them to drive, this is not a good situation. All right, so talk to your healthcare providers in terms of when is the right time to do these things, to stop working, to stop driving, and to be honest. The more you deny these things, the more danger you are putting yourself in. It's also important to ask for help. I worked with a family for so long when I ran a program in Connecticut in the United States, and there was a family who did not tell anybody about Huntington's disease. They had 2 children. This went on for years and years, and they denied everything, and this family was struggling. It came to a point where it was so bad that the children knew something was up. They did not talk to their 2 children. The children knew something was going on, and no one was talking to them, and their mental health went way down. They started hanging out with people who were not such good influences. They started using drugs. They started, not coming home. There was a lot of secrecy in this family. And it got to the point where the family said, we don't know what else to do. I mean, we're talking about legal issues. And it went from not talking to anyone, including their children, to me going and doing a town hall meeting with police, with firefighters, with their next door neighbors, with the person in the grocery store, with the post office guy. It went 180 degrees, where all of a sudden I was called in to say, we need help here. We're dying. You're dying, and we don't know what to do. So it was the entire community that came out. This was a little bit before a lot of the social media, and we did a town hall meeting that I just did a whole talk on Huntington's disease, and this community rallied around the family. I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say that there was a happily ever after and all of a sudden there was butterflies and rainbows, but the town knew to look out for these kids. The kids were in therapy after that. There was a lot of changes for the good. So I think it's really important to ask for help. Help isn't a bad thing. Be flexible when necessary. When you have a plan, when you have a person with Huntington's disease, and we know that sometimes there are cognitive and behavioral issues, if you say, we're all going to go out to dinner tonight and bring your friends and this is going to be great, have a backup plan, have an emergency plan. If that person with HD goes into a temper tantrum and says, I'm not going, and you're all not going, have a backup plan. You stay home. We're all going to go. We understand that you're having one of those HD days. You're having an off day. Or I'm going to have somebody from next door come in and just stay with you for a while, but I'm taking everybody out because we're not going to let you dictate what's going on here. Having an emergency plan can be really helpful. You might never need it, but again, it's like insurance that if you are planning ahead, if there's an event, if there's a conference, if there is a wedding, a bat mitzvah, whatever it is that you want to attend, make sure that there's a backup plan that, if the person with HD doesn't want to go, that you can still go and have things in place. Kids can have lots of feelings and reactions, and some of these, usually when I'm talking about these, there's a lot of head noddings for one of this. Kids can sometimes feel sorry for themselves because, again, they're egocentric, they're kind of narcissistic, they're thinking about me. Not in a bad way, but that's where their world is. It's about them in the center. Why is this happening to me? Where the family's like, this is, the mom has Huntington's. Why is this kid feeling this way? This is a normal reaction sometimes. Kids might feel angry at the affected person for being sick. They might be angry at the disease, but then take it out on the well parent. They might become super kid, and they're going to be setting unrealistically high goals. I'm going to go to school. I'm going to come home. I'm going to take care of my loved one. I'm going to go wash the dishes. I'm going to wash the dog. They become this super person. And kids might feel scared and be fearful that something will happen to the sick person when they're not there, so they might feign stomach aches and headaches. That's a sign of a child saying to you, I'm not well. I need some help here. If that child is getting continual headaches and stomach aches, not flu, not all the crap that's going around now, but truly psychosomatic, things that are impacting them psychologically, that's how a child's body tells you. So be on the lookout for that. Some kids might withdraw in order to become independent. I'm 5 years old, but mom has Huntington's disease and I'm going to have to be the man of the house. No, you're not. You're 5 years old. So that's important to know. Kids might resent the fact that they need to take care of the affected person. And we heard from a lot of people during this conference of people that were young to say, I'm taking care of my loved one. That we've seen that. We've seen that at camp. We've seen that at HDYO, where there's a lot of young people who their primary job is to take care of a person with HD. Is there a way? I know that they want to. I know that they feel that that's their job. Is there a way we can get other resources available in so that they can be a child once in a while? Kids might make a joke about everything to cover up their real feelings about HD. We have that class clown, that person who's always joking, and then that real emotion is pushed down, is repressed, and all that comes out are all these jokes. And some children will act out to get attention or might say that they feel ill in order to stay with the affected person. These are just some things that happen. Other people give me more information. Again, it's just to know that these are real reactions that can happen, and we need to validate them. So what do? It's very important to continue to set limits and firm limits with children. So I have families who say, well, there's HD in the family or they're at risk. I've had a parent, sacrifice their own needs and, and buy a child, a new BMW because they're like, well, they're 16 and they're going to, they felt guilty so that they were doing things to try to make themselves feel better. He doesn't have a curfew because, I don't know what his future is going to be like. That's not helpful for a child. It's normal to see some acting out when there are changes in a family. Communicate with children that your love and acceptance of them, but not the behavior. I know this is tough. I know that our family is different than, Johnny's family or Katie's family, but this is going to be our normal, that you're going to still need to come home, you're still going to need to do things. I love you, but I'm not loving this behavior that you're having. Reward good behavior and let them know how much you appreciate it. Thank you, for helping out, all right? So you don't have to overly help. If you want to help out a little bit, we'll give you a job to do, that's fine, but this is not your responsibility. But thank you so much for doing that. And please set limits with the internet. I know it's so hard. There's 5-year-olds and 4-year-olds who are running around with their own cell phones. I get it, I understand, but I think it's really important to say, what are the good websites? Because you can go down that rabbit hole of all those really bad videos that are out there. It's available to everyone. But if you say HDYO, HD Buzz, places that have good information and reliable information, sit down with a child and go over those websites with them. Let them know that those are safe places. And also share. Try to do things together as a family. And family in my family, it's not, I have a blended family. My husband and I have 5 children from, my marriage and his first marriage, my starter marriage. People are like, oh, 5, you guys are the Brady Bunch. No, we're not. We interact with each child. Sometimes we interact with all of them. But try to do things together as whatever you call family, whether that's chosen family, whether that's quality time. Laugh together. I have so many people who say, I can't go out, I can't go and take care of myself or have a good time. Why not? If you do that and take care of yourself, you're teaching your children to be able to take care of themselves as well. This is really important. Make up a slogan or a motto or something in your house and post it around your house. I have one family who said, "We got a lot of living left to do." That was what that was on every single mirror. When you had one of those crappy days and you looked in the mirror, it says, "We've got a lot of living left to do," and that reminded them. When you create positive memories, you teach your children that it's okay to have fun even when they are sad, even when there's a sad situation. And know that children can grow in their ability to face difficult experiences. We see all those young people that are out there. Children who are in families that are openly discuss Huntington's disease are resilient, and they might become more self-confident and independent. They might become more responsible sometimes. They might be more sensitive to other people's needs, and they might grow in their ability to understand and love another person, even if that person is different. And know that there are resources. So again, you're here. You all know about HDYO. It's a wonderful website. We have information, and it's not just for kids, little kids. We have HDYO Land. We have information for tweens and teens and young adults. We have information for parents, caregivers. We have information for professionals. So if you're working with somebody, to say, caregiver team, please go on HDYO and find out information. Also, I do have an Amazon, a Kindle book. I'm the worst salesperson, but I mean, it's the information is out there if you want it. You can download. You don't have to have an Amazon account, but you can get this ebook, which is part of my talk. What my talk is based on. HDSA from the United States has a list of all resources. That's the NYA. And Huntington's Disease Canada has YPAD. So there's all kinds of resources all over. Some of the resources I see are exactly what's in my book. So somebody's lifted them and put it on their website. Sometimes they give me credit, sometimes they don't. I don't care. There's enough HD, unfortunately, to go around. But just know that all of these resources are out there. So I actually made it to exactly 30 minutes. Don't know how I did that. It was fast. I understand that. I just wanted to get in the information. So if you are curious, you started. By coming here as families, you obviously are here for a reason. So whether that's to validate what you have done, whether that's to say, how do I begin? That's all good. I know that there's another session. I don't think there's a session in here, though. So if you want to stay and ask questions and have other people here, I'm open for all of that as well. And if not, thank you so much for your attention and for being here and for caring.